Harmful algal blooms, and what action we can take to address them. Hello and welcome to the Jefferson Educational Society's digital programming. I'm Ben Spagan and I'm the Vice President at the Jefferson and am a contributing editor at the Erie Reader. In that, harmful algal blooms, or HABs, is what we'll discuss here. Joining me for this conversation is Jefferson Educational Society Scholar in Residence, Dr. Judith Lynch. And Dr. Lynch started her time at the Jefferson as the first chair of the think tank's Board of Trustees, and she remains on that board today. She served as the inaugural director of the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy in 2015 and was named the Jefferson's Decadian Scholar in 2018. Amongst her many accomplishments, she has spent time in academia, serving as an associate professor of political science and history at Mercyhurst University, and prior taught at Allegheny College, where she was also a part of the Civic Engagement Institute there. She was also a 5-term county executive in Erie and was instrumental in drafting of the Erie County Home Rule Charter. Dr. Lynch also, and I always like to point this one out because it's one of my favorite tidbits about your biography and your history, Judy, was also an analyst for the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and she also taught 13 years at Villa Marie High School. She received her doctorate with distinction in political science in 2001 from the University of Pittsburgh and her master's degree in social studies from Gannon University. Her undergraduate degree, a bachelor's in history and political science, is from the George Washington University. Now, in this conversation, we're going to turn our attention to work Dr. Lynch has done to examine the environmental impacts to Lake Erie, particularly harmful algal blooms. Dr. Lynch first began calling attention to the issue with her Jefferson essay, The Lurking Threat: Harmful Algal Blooms Pose Global Local Hazard, and that was in 2018. Now, just a few weeks ago here in 2020, Dr. Lynch offered a follow-up report, making the case for a management alliance as region faces possible record year for algal blooms. For those looking to read either of those, both of those publications, or to just get refreshed on them, both the essay from 2 years ago and her recent report remain available on the Jefferson's website. And here we'll discuss the HABs, harmful algal blooms, and why it matters we pay attention to them, what we can do to address them, and more, including a look at the creation of a management alliance formed in Chautauqua, New York, not that far up the road from Erie, Pennsylvania, and what we stand to learn from that. Now, since this program is first airing live on the Jefferson's Facebook page, we'll work our way through as many questions from you, the viewers, as we can as we host this event. If you have a question, just leave it in the comment section below. If you happen to be watching or listening to a later broadcast of this event, please still send us your questions. We'll do our best to get them along to Dr. Lynch so we can keep the dialogue going. And for more information, of course, about upcoming Jefferson Educational Society programs and publications, please visit our website at www.jeserie.org. And be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dr. Judy Lynch, thank you for joining me for this conversation.
It's my pleasure, Brent. Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Lynch, you have written two important reads, the essay I mentioned covering harmful algal blooms, and now a report that offers recommendations of how communities like Erie's can take action. As I mentioned, both are still available on the website at jeserie.org. Before we get into the new recommendations, your updates here in 2020, I want to go back to the start for people who may not be familiar what exactly harmful algal blooms are. So when we say HABs, for the non-scientists out there, I'm one of them. Judy, what are HABs?
Well, first, Ben, I would just like to tell our listening audience and our viewing audience that my background, of course, is not science. I am a concerned citizen, and I've written these two publications because of my concern for the community. So even though algal, A-G-A-L, sounds like algae, and it comes from algae, we are not talking about algae, we are talking about a bacteria. And in this area, the type of bacteria that is related to HABs or is the agent of the HABs is cyanobacteria. So that is the item that is under discussion.
And so, Judy, what causes it? If we're looking at the bacteria and we notice that it's developing and we see this algal, what are some of the root causes of why it ends up where it ends up?
Well, first, Ben, I want to, as a concerned community person, please inform everybody who is out there that this is a very, very serious topic. Cyanobacteria can be poisonous. It produces a toxin, and those toxins can be lethal to people and lethal to dogs. And if there's anybody, and I'm sure that many of our visiting or our listening audience, viewing audience has been to the peninsula or elsewhere and have seen the postings for dogs particularly, that they are not to drink the water or go near the water because of the poisonous effect of the cyanobacteria producing toxins.
So I think one of the things that jumps to mind, because I know folks who have seen the signs, and Judy, they'll ask me, well, why dogs and not humans? And that's not to say it's not poisonous for humans, because in certain amounts it is lethal for humans, but it is more dangerous for dogs. Is there a reason that we're seeing it attack different species differently in terms of, perhaps humans can survive it a little bit better than dogs can?
No, that is not the case. And one of the things that has been asked me, well, could I take my 2-year-old in to swim where it is posted for dogs? And that's a big question. So one of the things, and we both have dogs, one of the things that we know about dogs is they lap up water. So even when they are in the water and they're swimming, they're often ingesting the water. And it's that type of ingesting that is problematic. So they're taking in so much of this toxic material that it's impacting their systems. And it's quite concerning. I don't know how many dogs have died, tremendous number. And very often it's posted in various news articles in the New York Times or other papers about dogs that have died. And of course, people have been affected too.
Well, and I think one of the things too that I had not taken into consideration until a friend of mine had told me, one of the things, aside from dogs lapping up the water, one of their ways of working to dry themselves after they come out of water is licking themselves. And so it's incredibly toxic for dogs. And so obviously we're grateful for the signs. We've got to watch out for the signs, and we've got to, make sure that we're paying attention, and looking up where it is we're going. But Judy, I know we're talking about Lake Erie here because that's the biggest body of water that Erie touches, and we can't help but think of our connection to the Great Lakes watershed in our portion of making Pennsylvania a Great Lakes state. But is this limited to lakes, or do we find harmful algal blooms in rivers, streams, elsewhere? Where all do we find harmful algal blooms?
We find harmful algal blooms everywhere there is water. However, it is most likely in lakes and in ponds. We find it along the coastal areas in the east and off of California. We find it off of the European coast. We find it in the Mediterranean. We find it in Russia. And one of the newest areas to be affected is Lake Baikal, which is the largest lake in the world, and very pristine lake. It's been recognized as the purest body of water, and it is now beset by harmful algal blooms.
So, Judy, is this something that nature is causing, or is this person-made? Is this something we're doing to the environment?
Well, of course, it's a combination of both, and it has to do with climate change. So what is it that makes this bacteria bloom and grow and produce these toxins? It is the warming of the water, and also the feeding of the algal bloom. And of course, what the components are that they feed on is phosphorus and nitrogen in particular. So everywhere you see phosphorus runoff or nitrogen runoff, amounts going into a body of water, you can expect the growth of harmful algal blooms.
So Judy, I'm not out there dumping phosphorus or nitrogen, nor am I working with it daily, but where's that coming from? I read most often that, it's used in farming.
Yes, it is.
Majority from farming? Is it coming from elsewhere? Where do we see these elements entering now the watershed?
Well, it's a very complicated situation. So primarily from farming. And what happens, of course, in these large farms, you have fertilizer put onto the ground, and you may have storms, particularly in the spring, which are pretty significant. They wash the fertilizer off into kind of the drainage systems, and then it flows into the streams and into the lake. So phosphorus, yes. Nitrogen is also comes from a couple different sources. It can come from fertilizers, and if you are a homeowner and you like your green grass and you want to keep it green, very often people either fertilize their own land or get a company to come in to fertilize, and that is usually a nitrogen product. And here again, you have that nitrogen washing off into the streets, into the sewer systems, and because our sewer systems are not definitely modernized to the extent that they should be, washing into the lake.
I think that's one of the things that maybe we lose sight of sometimes is the fact that runoff can go directly still into the lake. We might not be thinking that it goes the way that it did decades ago, but still we are contributing as things pour into the lake. Judy, I want to go back to that essay, if I can, that you wrote 2 years ago for us back in 2018, and what really caught my attention when you first started talking about this around the Jefferson was the subtitle. Harmful algal blooms pose global local hazard. And I understand it local because I had seen the signs before, but global. We had Dr. Patricia Gliebert from the University of Maryland in for the Global Summit, who was kind enough to work with us to write a report that helped follow up your work and talk about it in a global aspect, the global implications. Judy, for those who might not have caught that program or are just catching up to this conversation, this topic today on harmful algal blooms, how global of a problem is this? Is this a United States thing? Is this a North America thing? Is this continental, or is this truly worldwide?
This is worldwide. And one of the things that that particular presenter said is that particularly hog farms have kind of a refuse that is problematic, and their disposal is sometimes most harmful, and it washes again into the streams and finally into the lakes. And it is high in nitrogen, and so you're going to get the growth of these harmful algal blooms. But I was particularly saddened by her view because I thought her view was very pessimistic. This is my opinion, of course, okay? And one of the things she said, there's not much that you can do about it. I really think that there are things that you can do about it. One of the things she was proposing is that people should think about becoming vegetarians, and the beef, the raising of cattle and the raising of hogs are particularly problematic because they produce all of this type of effluent that washes into the lakes and the streams.
Well, Judy, I think that's not the first time we've heard somebody make a recommendation that human impact on the climate can be adjusted if we adjust our diets. I know one of the things that continually comes up is the idea of the amount of methane produced by cattle farms in terms of that's impact on our ozone, and how that's speeding up the decay of that. So even if we didn't go full vegan, perhaps even if we just cut back and made some dietary restrictions, we could have an impact there. That's one of the ways that she pointed to. I want to come later to some of the recommendations you have, because you had some great ones in that essay. But when we think of global, I think a lot of people are going to wonder the same thing I'm wondering. How do we stack up? And we being the United States of America, so how does our country stack up in handling this? Are we a global leader when it comes to this, or are we playing from behind?
Well, one of the things that we note from the COVID situation is how separated we are, separated into states and separated into local communities. And each state and even the local communities are dealing with the harmful algae blooms in their own way. So there's no uniform process, even though that the United States has entered into a compact. And this is the US government plus all of the states that border the Great Lakes. They have entered into a compact with Canada to reduce the phosphorus and the nitrogen that go into the Great Lakes. So we are part of a united effort, but there are no set patterns for us to address these particular issues. So it may be one situation in, let's say, in the Northeast along Maine, where the contamination is something that is producing harm for the shellfish industry, and another for the salmon industry, maybe in the far west. And so it's different throughout the United States. We don't have a single way of addressing harmful algal blooms. However, uniformly, in my opinion, even in an interior state like Utah, okay, people have recognized that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. We cannot turn our head. We cannot say, oh, well, it's just part of the modern age. We need to deal with it.
Well, Judy, I think that's one of the things that is so helpful. The work you're doing is calling attention to it so that we're not burying our heads in the sand and, you know, perhaps ingesting harmful algal blooms as we start to bury our heads in the sand because this is dangerous. You said you have a more optimistic view than Dr. Glibber did when she came in, and we talked about her recommendation of changing diet. You know, that's a way to mitigate this. Judy, not to give away the entire essay because I'm encouraging people to go and read it and refresh themselves with it, but what were some of the recommendations, some of the ideas you had in there that you think still hold weight today, 2 years from the time you wrote it? What should we be doing? How can we work on the problem?
Well, one of the things Ohio began to do, and also in Pennsylvania, we are doing through our conservation district, is working with farmers to do best practices and making them fully aware of what the impact is when they have phosphorus or nitrogen that flow into the streams that empty into Lake Erie. So I think we need to continue that particular effort. We also need to do other things. For instance, bank erosion, the erosion along the banks of the streams, that carries what we call legendary phosphorus or nitrogen. And that word legendary means that it's old.
It's not good in this case, right? I mean, normally when I hear legendary, I think this is great. This is horrible if it's legendary, right, Judy?
Absolutely. Okay, because what it is that it is phosphorus and nitrogen that have come into the drainage systems, usually through great storms and the impact of those storms, and yet over time they sit in the drains. They build up, and so there is legendary phosphorus, or it's old phosphorus, old nitrogen, years and years old, that's embedded in these storm drains. We need to look at that and to begin to address the issue, clean out the drains, and make sure that that's not washing into the lake. Now, one of the other things that is interesting too is that scientists now believe there is this legendary sediment of phosphorus and nitrogen at the bottom of Lake Erie. That Lake Erie has tremendous amount of phosphorus that is built up. Now, why is phosphorus and nitrogen so important? That is what the algal blooms feed on. It is something that creates, you know, this bloom and this significant growth. And it is really, if we could eliminate the phosphorus runoff and the nitrogen runoff, we would go a long way to really, I believe, reducing the issue and making it at least something that we could deal with maybe in another way. But remember, it's not only dealing with current farmers and their practices and making sure they are using best practices, but also cleaning out drains and the riverbanks and all of that sort of thing, and cleaning out the phosphorus and the nitrogen. Now, phosphorus and nitrogen are chemicals, and they are valuable. And so if you clean them out, you probably have a residue. Perhaps there is an industry that could develop to kind of have a resource at its fingertips that it could use in order to make money. Hey, we've got some phosphorus, we've got some nitrogen. It may be years old, but it still can be purified and reused. So maybe this is something that could be done. We need absolutely to explore every avenue of what can be done. And so this is the reason why. It's not only because of the toxins that are produced, okay, but it's the impact on the community and on the economy. We have our tourist industry is a $1 billion industry. There are close to 1,000 workers every summer that work in the tourism industry. We cannot afford for the lake to go dead, for the lake to have no fish available, to have swimming just not something that anybody would want to participate in. And if we see those gates at the peninsula close because of harmful algae blooms, we know that this area, this county, has suffered an unbelievable economic downfall.
So Judy, you must be reading my mind, because as much as I think two words that people are going to remember out of this presentation are legendary phosphorus, which could be a great band name if anybody wants that, but they're not going to forget those two words. But two words that I had thought about preparing for this conversation coming in is dead zones. And I can't help but think about when Lake Erie was declared dead. Is history raging anew again? Is Lake Erie dying? Do we have these dead zones that we see associated with harmful algal blooms?
Well, remember when Lake Erie was actually declared dead, okay, and the Cuyahoga River burned, okay, that was in the late 60s and 69 or early 70s when that situation existed. And at that time, again, the states came together, the nation was there, said we've got to do something to protect the Great Lakes. And so they entered into this compact. And there was a significant reduction of phosphorus. And that phosphorus was largely coming from the farming community. And so what it was accomplished is the regeneration of Lake Erie. And it was miraculous in a sense. And now we are talking about doing that again. That's where we need to go. And we have our mission, and what we need to do is have some action steps.
Well, I think what makes this complicated, because yes to the action steps, and we've got to take action. And as you mentioned, tourism plays such a crucial role here. Lake Erie, Presque Isle, those are our greatest assets. We might, agree or disagree on the economic indicators and how we move our economy and how we measure our region. But something that makes Erie is Presque Isle and Lake Erie, those two things. And, those action steps, I think, are a little complicated, Judy, because of the levels. At least my understanding, if you have, federal government working on something, state government working on other, and you have local municipalities. You mentioned a little bit about Ohio and New York, what they're doing. I want to talk about the work of Pennsylvania in that mix too. So what as a state are we doing right now? And then locally, what as a county are we doing right now? And where do we need to ramp up the effort?
What we do here in Erie County is we test and post, and we also educate. Now, all of those things are extremely important, because with the testing, we know where the algae blooms are, and we know the toxicity level and whether it's dangerous for dogs and dangerous for humans. And then that is posted so that people know that those waters are dangerous. And that is a tremendous contribution to the safety of the community. But it's not enough. It truly is not enough. And what we need is an organization, a large composite organization that would include the Regional Science Consortium. It would include all of the others in this area that contribute to this testing and posting, like the Erie County Health Department. And it would include government organizations like the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Resources. And so this composite group should come together and establish a management alliance. It's an alliance of organizations, but this is the most important thing, in my opinion, okay? They need the stakeholders, and the stakeholders are the people in the economy that lose if in fact the lake becomes unswimmable, the fish are non-existent, and the lake is not usable for tourism or for any type of recreation. So the stakeholders are certainly the Homeowners Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the Erie Downtown. All of these are extremely, the Community Foundation, ECRA. These are organizations that have a stake, an economic stake in the welfare of the community. And they should be part of this composite group, this alliance. And of course, we have these type of organizations in existence, both in Ohio and New York, and we could use them as models for how we go about creating this management alliance. And the ones in New York are, there are two of them, one focused on Chautauqua Basin, and the other one focused on the Lake Erie Basin. And they are the ones that apply for funds. First of all, they do an action plan. They create a step program. They apply for funds, and then they actually administer the projects, and then they calibrate what the success of the project has been, and they move forward. And that's what we need. We don't need just testing and posting and information. Those are wonderful things to offer the community, but we need the impact of doing something, of really making a way in which to reduce harmful algal blooms.
So Judy, in Chautauqua, with this collaboration, with this alliance, with this management consortium, how did they get started? And what was their driving force? Was it simply, we now need to do something? Did somebody pick up, who changed the action steps? Because one of my favorite, I'm with a journalism background, I love a good lead. And I loved your first sentence, to this report, which was Confucius. You brought in Confucius, saying, wisely counseled that when it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. So how did they get started? Who picked up the first phone? Who picked up the first shovel? Who picked up the first what to get things moving in Chautauqua, New York?
Well, everybody knows what the most important institution in Chautauqua is. It's the Chautauqua Institution, and it's what runs the programming and everything that makes Chautauqua such just a gold medal type of institution. And so, if in fact, and we know that harmful algal blooms have been a factor in Chautauqua for some years, and a growing factor, negative factor for the Chautauqua Institution. And so that's the reason. And about 2 or 3 years ago, they came together to create this alliance. And through the alliance, they have applied for funds, and they have received, millions and millions of dollars largely from the state of New York, but also from the federal government. What has Erie County received? Zippo. Okay. Now the Regional Science Consortium, funded by, in part, funded by the state government and the Conservation District, but as a whole, there has been no funding for remediation, not testing and posting, but remediation of harmful algal blooms.
So Judy, one of the questions coming in, because I want to get back to that again of how we can work together and perhaps
Mhm.
build some sort of coalition, or at least encourage the building of such a coalition to do something like they're doing in Chautauqua. But an audience question, Judy, that's come in, somebody's curious about the science again of harmful algal blooms. Have you found anything in your research that is either a naturally occurring element or substance, or a person made and an artificially created element or substance, something that could just be, and I think maybe in its most basic sense, a synthetic or a natural just dumped in to deplete or eradicate the harmful algal blooms? Do we have such a thing? Have we developed such a thing? Are scientists working on such a thing that you know
Well,
of?
well, remember cyanobacteria, which is what we're talking about with harmful algae blooms, is a natural occurring bacteria, and it is ages old. In fact, it goes back to the origins of the earth, okay? So this is not, it is an organism. It is not something that has been invasive, that is not part of our whole ecosystem. But the problem is what's feeding it and making it mushroom and making it, just grow out of proportion. And that is the phosphorus and the nitrogen. And some questions ago, we were talking about the dead areas of Lake Erie. And what happens is that when the algae blooms grow, and they grow and they grow, and they are so stimulated by the phosphorus and the nitrogen, but sooner or later they die, okay? And they form a mat. And what they do is they create these dead zones. And this is the fear. This is one of the fears. If you look at the dead zones in Lake Erie, it's in our central basin, largely in the central basin. Now you have to know that Lake Erie has three basins. One is the Western Basin, and that's the Toledo all the way to Cleveland. And the Western Basin is past Cleveland, but it includes Ashtabula and the Erie area. That's the Central Basin. And this is the dead part of Lake Erie, and is growing and growing and growing by the year. So please, for our viewing audience, if they would go to the internet, they could get a lot of information. It is called hypoxia. Hypoxia. It is the lack of oxygen. And so when oxygen is no longer available because of this cloud of blooms that are over it, then of course the fish die and all of the other organisms that exist on oxygen die. And of course the algae blooms eventually die. Everything in the lake is dead.
And what I'm hearing there, Judy, is that Erie County, we're positioned toward the Central Basin. So we
are in the Central
are
Basin.
in the
We
Central
are,
Basin.
and I would say about the third, this is my opinion, about a third of the Central Basin has this hypoxia, or could be classified as dead.
And Judy, you referenced people to go to the internet and check this out. I would remind
Right.
listeners and viewers too that both your essay on harmful algal blooms, the global and local hazard, the threat they pose, as well as your follow-up on recommendations of now what to do, your follow-up report, both of those are available on the Jefferson's website at jeserie.org, as well as a report from Dr. Patricia Gleber from the University of Maryland. And pointing people to the internet to go look for stuff, Judy, I think is a great opportunity. But we've seen too the impact of loss of life in Lake Erie and what that's done to our economy. And Dr. David Frew has been covering that in and out on his On the Waterfront series for the Jefferson as well. So there are pieces available on our website that talk about the loss of the fishing industry when perhaps we overfished. But here we see a threat in terms of, the loss of life because we're doing something to the lake. Back to Chautauqua, though, Judy, I want to ask, and maybe it's an unfair question to ask of them because you mentioned it's a relatively new organization, just a few years old, but can you give us a sense of how they've moved the needle, what accomplishments they've made, what sort of progress they were able to do in the first few years as Confucius advises us, changing the action steps? They adjusted, they pivoted. What have we seen as they've gotten started?
Well, first of all, they have action steps. We don't. Okay? And we have a goal, the same goal that that Chautauqua has, or the same goal that is in Ohio or any other place. The goal is to have a swimmable and a recreational treasure that remains available not only to us, but to future generations. And we know how critically important it is. It's not just for our enjoyment, but it's also for the economy. So this is essential for us to address this issue. And the Management Alliance is the way in which that we can move beyond testing and posting and educating. We create first an action plan, okay? And so the action plan says, this is our goal, a swimmable, recreational, usable area. And these are the action steps. We want to reduce phosphorus. We want to reduce nitrogen. We want to address legacy phosphorus and nitrogen. We want to do any other things that we or science makes us understand are critical for accomplishing the goal. And we not only want to make those steps, we want to take those steps, take those actions, but we also want to calibrate them. We want to say, how successful were they? Were they 100%? Where did we fail? Should they be adjusted? Remember what Confucius says, don't adjust your goals. We know what the goal is, but let's look at the actions that we need to take. Take those actions, whatever it seems to be appropriate at the time, and then investigate how successful they are, adjust the actions and move forward until we really know that that goal is it's reachable, it's in hand.
So Judy, I want to go back to the beginning, because when I introduced you, Dr. Lynch, somebody who studied political science, somebody who has taught history in political science, someone who's been a politician, worked with politicians, and you admittedly offered up to us, you're not a scientist in the beginning, you were a concerned citizen. How did you first become concerned about this? What was the red flag for you? What was the moment that you said, this is research I want to take on, this is a subject I must call attention to? What got you interested and excited in pursuing this to enact change?
Okay, I have a stake in the game. All right. It is my great, I guess, pleasure or whatever to own the old Kelso Beach Hotel at Kelso Beach. And one of the things is along the lake in that area, there's Kelso Beach, there's Waldemere, Kelso Beach, and then as you go down Bear Beach, and you could go down to Powell Avenue, the Powell Avenue Beach. And all you have to do is walk along and you see what is happening. You see streams, water coming into the lake that is frothy and white with bubbles. And you're going, what? What's going on here? But we're not testing that stream. And if anybody is testing it, nobody is doing anything about it. Okay? And when you walk along, you very definitely see what is called Cladophora, or this buildup of the algae. This is algae, okay? The buildup of the algae that is matted and that becomes, maybe 6-8 inches deep of nothing but algae. And you know what it is doing? It is eliminating the oxygen within, at the bottom, and everything at the bottom is dead. Please note, okay, that I am of an age that I can remember way back, okay? When I was a child, we walked through every stream in Crawford County and some in Erie County. I had 2 brothers at that time, and we would get minnows, we would get crabs, everything that crawled or was something we were chasing or whatever. Today, if you walk through the streams, you will find little or no life, little or no life. And there's a reason for that. And we need to address that, because that is impacting our entire environment. And it's also impacting what we pass on to our children and grandchildren and the new generations to come.
So, Dr. Lynch, that's one of the things I think I'm going to hold on to from this conversation. I think I'm also going to hold on to the idea of the importance in having signage out, and we need to continue doing that. We need to continue educating, but and updating the signs of, this is harmful to dogs and to, small children and to people. We need to be clear about the threat and take those action steps. And I know two words I'm not going to forget are legendary phosphorus. I'm going to remember that from this. But of all the things we covered, as we're nearing the end of the conversation here, as we're about out of time, what would you say are looking back, what would you say are the most important things that anybody listening in today or listening to a later broadcast on demand of this conversation, what do they need to take away right now as we move forward on this topic?
The most important thing is this affects our future, our economy, and the way in which we live in Erie County. Erie County would not exist historically if it did not have the bayfront and if it was not on Lake Erie. It is its position, its location that has made it historically grow and to be the dominant economic force that it has been. And we need to pay attention to that. And we also need to know that we're part of a larger area, because the Great Lakes, as I've been told, are actually a river. And they run, of course, all the way through to the Niagara River. And we have a portion of them. But there is another organization in New York. It's called LERPA, okay? LUPA, excuse me. It's the Lake Erie, it is the Lake Erie part of New York that has a management organization that is in charge of the water in Lake Erie. We need, perhaps as a Jefferson, to bring somebody in from LUPA or bring somebody in from the Chautauqua Management Alliance to talk to us about how they organize and what they see as the benefits of their organization, what they see as the future, and how are they going to confront this situation in an ongoing way.
Dr. Lynch, I love that homework. We're going to bring him in for a conversation so we can help our audience learn more about the work that is happening in New York and happening elsewhere as we continue to address this. Work needs to be done. We're so grateful for both your report, making recommendations of how to address harmful algal blooms, and then two, your foundational essay to really introduce this topic to our community. So Dr. Judy Lynch, thank you so much for joining us for this Jefferson program.
My great pleasure, and I thank you for bringing this issue to the attention of the community. Thank you so very much.
And a big thanks to all of you watching along at home, either on the live broadcast or streaming this at your leisure. These programs are posted on our website at jeserie.org, as well as our YouTube account, and remain available on our Facebook page. And of course, to read either or both the essay and the report that I've mentioned numerous times by Dr. Judy Lynch that we discussed here today, head over to the Jefferson's website, again, jeserie.org. You'll find that report, and you'll find many other fascinating reports that she's written, as well as a host of other authors that have contributed recent material to the Jefferson Educational Society. And you'll find more information about both upcoming and past Jefferson programs. You can stream those programs from the past, and you can look at what's coming ahead from us. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Educational Society, I'm Ben Spagan. Be safe, be sound, and thanks for listening and learning with us.